The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, continuing our coverage of preseason fantasy football for 2018. Not doing the 2017 ranks anymore, although I bet you mine would be substantially better now, knowing what I know, than they were about 12 months ago. Joining me on the show today to talk about some confusing running back backfields and that NFL list of the top players of the year voted on by the players, which triggered a lot of people online. It is brand new to yahoosports.com and the creator of the Reception Perception. It's Matt Harmon. What's going on, dude?
Oh, Pat, it's good to be here talking to you. You know, yeah, my first show now as a Yahoo official employee, I guess. And yeah, it's a great time to be talking fantasy football. Like, I love this time of year. Everything's kind of ramping up. Things are heating up online, the debates and everything like that. And yeah, I'm just really excited. Thanks so much for having me today.
No problem. Thanks for making this your first stop on what I'm assuming is going to be a giant media blitz to get you all ready. But like, just as a tease, what can some people expect from you now that you're over at Yahoo?
We can expect a lot, man. And that was what was so exciting about meeting with Yahoo and kind of hearing their pitch to come over there, was that this is really a kind of a blank slate type of role. I think there's going to be a lot of exploration of what we're doing on social media, putting out some content there. But, you know, a lot of things that you're familiar seeing from me before, you know, writing, reception, perception. I can definitely say there's going to be a little bit more of that over at Yahoo, in addition to what I've been doing with the fantasy footballers. So it's exciting, man. It's going to be pretty much, I think that's a great team over there. You know, they've got Brad, they've got Liz, they've got Scott Pianowski, Dalton, Andy Behrens. They've got just a ton of people that I think I can really compliment and grow with and learn from. So it's an exciting time. I could not be more like thankful for this opportunity.
It's such a big platform, and with so many good fantasy writers over there already, I just think this is going to just blow a lot of people away that are, I mean, when you read one of Andy's columns and you read one of Brad's columns, or you listen to like Liz and you listen to Brad on the podcast, it's all so many different voices that I just think yours is going to be a huge compliment to that. So I'm excited to see what Yahoo has coming down the pike for us here a little bit later. And if, you know, people just want to hear me rant about crazy things, I do actually have a ton of fantasy football coverage up already. I went through early rankings with Mike Clay, Al Zeidenfeld, Rich Rebar, and Jake Seeley. Myself and Adam Levitan have an ADP series, the first 2 episodes already out. There's more coming in the coming weeks. I'm going to release my rankings in about 10 to 15 days, whenever I can, you know, figure it out. I got to talk it through with Seeley one more time to some of the players that I'm not sure about. And this is one of the main reasons I want to talk to you, Matt. Plus, you can find all those shows in the description of this episode, the ones that are coming out already, obviously. And I'll try to update them as we go along. Don't be afraid to give it a like, by the way. It goes a long way, just like the reviews on the audio version. But there's some players that I just can't figure out how to rank, and a lot of them are just in backfield. So before we just jump into some of these confusing backfields, I want to get sort of a macro version of draft strategy this year as it pertains to running back. And I've been asking a lot of people this. You know, zero RB was the really trendy thing to do like the last 2 years. And then it didn't work out last year. Now no one wants to do it anymore. So what is the proper running back strategy? Or is it just dictated by what pick you have? Like if you have a top 3 pick, spend it on a running back, then adjust from there?
Yeah, this year is funny because I do think that, you know, early running back is much more in vogue. Obviously, I think there's a lot more bell cow type of backs available, but that kind of does lend itself to maybe pushing up some of these wide receiver values. So far in drafts for me, I have noticed that it does depend on where you land in the draft. You know, if you are one of those top 3 to 4, maybe even 5 picks, you are going to probably be spending it on a Le'Veon Bell, a David Johnson. You know, the fact that you can get a David Johnson type player that, you know, is probably in line for another massive workload season like we saw in 2016 at like the 5th pick or 4th pick, you know, that is really appealing. So if you're starting from that position, you're probably going in the running back direction. But if you're, you know, maybe in that later first round, then it becomes maybe more appealing to double up on some wide receiver values there. For example, I'm doing a best ball draft right now with a, you know, bunch of guys from the industry. And I was there around that 1-2 turn, and I ended up with DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones. And like, that is a really appealing way to start your draft too. So I think this year is like, just, it's really heavy on a lot of good options too. I did another draft too just recently where I did take David Johnson in that 4th, 5th pick range, and then came back around the second round and got AJ Green at that 2 to 3 turn, and that's also very appealing. So it does feel like this year kind of has a lot of options. You can go early running back, you can go more of that wide receiver heavy approach. And from there, it's just about being flexible and figuring out how you can adjust within the draft.
Well, one of the best ways to really mine some value is to figure out and unlock the code to some of these backfields where we're not sure how it's going to break down. It could end up just being a split, and that's really not advantageous for anyone, at least in terms of a fantasy perspective. But if you can really mine, not necessarily a bell cow back, but someone who plays 65 to 75% of the snaps, which I guess in today's NFL would make them a bell cow back, but if they can be in the receiving game plus generate carries along with it. So the first one I want to start with is the Green Bay backfield. You have Ty Montgomery is probably not going to be back there. So you have Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. Do you have any sort of lean or hearing anything about which way this might shake out?
Well, I think the Packers have been pretty upfront about telling us that this is likely going to be a committee approach. I was really high on Ty Montgomery last year. Obviously, that did not work out. Injuries and a lot of other things.
Hold on a second. You were wrong about something as a fantasy analyst?
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that.
And I still got hired by a company. I mean, what are they thinking? They should have seen the receipts from last year. No, but I think that Ty Montgomery, obviously injuries played a big role there in what derailed him in terms of his efficiency last year. But overall, I'm looking at this year as another year where you're probably going to want to chase members of that backfield. I don't really care so much whether you thought Ty Montgomery was a good player or not last year. The reason you're chasing running backs from this backfield is pretty simply because it's attached to an Aaron Rodgers-led offense. I think you can still look at Ty Montgomery later in drafts, but obviously the two guys that people want to talk about are Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. Both kind of got their chances last year. Jones kind of had the first crack at replacing Ty Montgomery, but then he went down with an injury of his own. And then we saw Jamal Williams really come in there and handle like a beefy workload. And I think that's really something that I'm paying attention to this year. I think that the Green Bay coaching staff definitely values the trust that they have in Williams in terms of just being a reliable, successful runner, picking up the yardage that's there for him, and especially being a really good pass blocker. I think that's going to be key in deciphering this split. Aaron Jones definitely is the flashier player, high yards per carry. Whether you look at like the next gen stats data that I was working with at NFL Network, they show that, he is a very elusive player, hard to bring down on first attempt. He's definitely the guy that maybe has that higher ceiling, but I do think Williams is a rather safe pick too. So my approach with these guys right now, since there's still not so much clarity, is just kind of taking stabs at both of them depending on where the values fall.
Well, one interesting thing about Jamal Williams is that he ranked inside the top 5 of all running backs last year with, the minimum carry qualification. I think it was like 80 carries or something like that. But he was in top 5 in fewest rushes for either no gain or loss of yards. So he was always consistently gaining yards. You're right. Aaron Jones can break off these big ones, but Jamal Williams seems like the more rounded back. I'm just trying to pull up their ADPs right now. I would guess neither one of them are really going that high. We'll talk about this from a PPR perspective, and it did seem like Williams was not necessarily a great pass catcher, but a better pass catcher than Aaron Jones. And there's always a possibility with the dearth of talent, really, when we think about depth at receiver for Green Bay, is it out of the question that they just moved Ty Montgomery back to the slot?
No, I don't think so. And if you look at their receiving core right now, they have Devontae Adams, who I think is in line for a big season, in terms of just his overall market share of that offense. They have Randall Cobb, who I really like as a bounce back player. But then after that, it's just a load of question marks. They have Jimmy Graham at the tight end position. But then when you're looking at that number 3, number 4 receiver spot, they have Geronimo Allison, who they've trusted enough to throw out there with here and there with a few chances when someone's been hurt. They drafted 3 receivers this year in that 4th to 5th to 7th round range. So I don't know that they have a lot of clarity at that receiver group. So there's no doubt they could still use Ty Montgomery in kind of the old OW offensive weapon distinction type of role this year.
Yeah, I really hope that one of their rookie receivers hits, just for naming purposes. They have Jamon Moore. He's in there. They have the Equinanius St. Brown guy, which I just assumed was a fake name until someone told me he was a real player. And Marquez Valdez Scantling. I'm not big on the
Right.
I'm not big on the hyphen people. I always feel like that's just working against you as an athlete. Like, how many good hyphen players are there in any sport, really?
They've got to split the jersey. It's a lot more work for the equipment staff. You're right. That is definitely a red flag.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Hornets. I mean, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, please. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? No, thank you. I don't know about this, although Valdez-Scantling is pretty good. So I hope one of those guys...
Yeah, there's a lot of flash. There's a lot of flash with those names. And I mean, anybody that's going to be attached to an Aaron Rodgers-led offense that we can also enjoy saying their name, I mean, there's a lot of appeal there.
Hey, hell, if Jeff Janis can just still have the love of Davis Maddock after all these years, one of these guys with Aaron Rodgers can do something. But right now, ADP-wise, Aaron Jones going significantly higher in 12-team PPR leagues. Pick number 86 is his average draft position, 114 for Jamal Williams. So I guess unless news comes out and be like, listen, Aaron Jones is the clear-cut starter, I think I'm fine with Jamal Williams 4 rounds later.
Yeah, I'm with you. It depends, too, just on the context of the running backs that you've selected earlier. In a lot of drafts where I've taken some safer players earlier in the early rounds of the running back position, maybe I'm okay taking kind of an upside swing at Aaron Jones to maybe have that ceiling pick that can be a potential RB1. But yeah, if I've taken some riskier players early on, then maybe I am okay with doubling back on Jamal Williams there, who, again, it really doesn't matter what you think of the two players in terms of who's talented. It really just matters who the coaching staff is going to put out there. And I think the fact, as you mentioned, that Williams is that consistent runner and, a solid B- in the receiving game, and especially a really good pass blocker. Again, I think that's important. That's probably going to give him some more opportunities to not lose that job.
Jets backfield, we got Isaiah Crowell, Bilal Powell, the guy that I hyped up last year and got that completely wrong. That's no fun. Although this year I can take him for free, so I really can't be wrong. And Elijah McGuire, Lizzie, he's back there as well. So what do you think happens to start the year? McCown under center, or do you think that Darnold will just be there week 1?
I think it ends up being McCown, but I feel less confident in that than I probably would have, about a month ago this time. There's some Jets beat writers really talking up Teddy Bridgewater. I know it's hard. It's easy to shrug that off, but I do think he's a guy that if he looks good, maybe he becomes trade bait. At this point, it's kind of confusing why he's even on the roster, but it is the Jets. So I don't really know that I feel as confident that McCown is going to be under center, but I would still say he's my favorite to be the week 1 starting quarterback.
Okay, so I guess the real question is, no matter who they start at quarterback, are the Jets going to be any good? Because I don't think they are. I think that'll be trailing in a lot of these games.
Yeah, right. Like, that's the thing about these type of backfields, when there's A, not clarity, and then B, probably not, it couldn't be two different backfields that we've already discussed. Green Bay, I want to care about anybody getting touches in that backfield. An offense like the Jets, I don't know that I'm going to care about anybody getting touches in that offense, because if it's going to be a split and it's already a split of a lesser pie, that's where you really start to, you're working with a thin margin of error there. I like these players enough as running backs, but just given their situation, I have not found myself drafting, either of Bilal Powell or Isaiah Crowell this year.
Well, Crowell's going around pick 90 right now, and I can see them opening up a lot of games by just turning around, handing the ball off to Crowell, and hoping that works out. A lot like the Browns strategy from the past 50 years or however long he was with Cleveland. But, he's going to pound it. He's going to rack up a lot of carries, not really doing you much from a PPR perspective. Maybe if they get inside the goal line, he's the one who handles all the touches. But I start thinking about Bilal Powell, and one of the reasons that I liked him so much last year is that I expected the Jets to be trailing in a lot of games, which didn't come to fruition. They were a lot better than I think that anyone really anticipated. But if they're very bad this season and they start getting behind in games, he seems to me like the logical pass catcher. I don't want to say that he's going to garner as many touches per game as someone like Chris Thompson did last year or create the big plays, but we've seen situations with Powell over the years in New York that once they get down in games, Powell's just on the field and they just dump it off to him 8 times.
Yeah, he has 1 or 2 great months every year that I think people end up riding him with. And I think there's a chance that, like you mentioned, Crowell is kind of the guy earlier in the year, and maybe Bilal Powell does have that month-long stretch. But I have started thinking about lately, Elijah McGuire is basically free in almost any draft you do, even like some 18-round best ball drafts, he doesn't get selected. He did flash a little bit here and there as a rookie. Obviously wasn't a super consistent runner, by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think he has the ability to be kind of that splashy guy here and there. And on a team like the Jets that is certainly rebuilding and seeking an identity on offense, maybe they do turn to kind of the youngest guy at some point. So I don't know that I'm necessarily bookmarking him as a pick later on in drafts at this point, but he's certainly somebody that I think you keep on waiver wire speed dial and you at least monitor during the preseason process.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it too, that it depends on the size of your league, the scoring type of your league, because Bilal Powell at pick 168 in PPR leagues, if you're playing in a 14-team league, he's not a terrible last-round pick. Maybe just, they come out in the second half, they're down by 28, you're like, well, we need dump-offs all of a sudden, and there's the Bilal Powell consistency that you need week to week because the Jets are no good, and therefore Bilal Powell is a better fantasy player because of it. But using the waiver wire, I play, my home league is on Yahoo, so you can appreciate this one once you get more acclimated with the system. I prefer the system a little bit more than the NFL.com ones, I can tell you that now that you're no longer there.
Yeah, I guess we don't have to fight about that on air anymore. Although that's my funniest thing, though, is someone said yesterday, like, oh, now you're going to get berated by people when Yahoo's platform doesn't work. I'm like, oh yeah, that never happened at my previous place of employer. And by the way, like I couldn't do anything about either one of them.
Oh, come on. I thought your role was analyst/computer programmer.
Yeah, right. Like, let me, and then somebody would say too, like, oh, well, don't you at least know who runs that department? I'm like, have you ever worked at a large corporation before? It doesn't really work. Like they're sitting down the aisle there.
Yeah, you know 8 people, and the company is full of like 2,000 people. But like,
yeah, exactly.
Using that watch list at the beginning of the year to identify the Elijah McGuires of the world, just to see what's going on, because I find that sometimes you can see like an uptick in terms of snap share or potentially receiving targets through the first few weeks, and then you kind of forget about the guys for a little bit. Using that watch list on the waiver wire on your free agency, I think is like a critical move in order to gaming your roster and really building it into something towards the playoffs. So anyway, this is the most important one. Dolphins backfield. Because if you told me Kenyon Drake plays 75% of the snaps, I would say he's a fringy top 10 running back based on the way that they use him. But Frank Gore's there, and I just get the feeling they're going to use Frank Gore.
Yeah, they got Frank Gore there. There's been some, Miami, like their beat has generally been like probably the least reliable in terms of helping us predict like fantasy breakout players. But there has been some talk about Kalen Ballage down there in OTAs and how good he's looked. I don't know how much I want to buy into that, but yeah, Kenyon Drake is the player this year that I struggle with the most, because there's no doubt I think he's, his yards per carry, his overall efficiency is going to come down this year from the legitimately great kind of preview we got from him at the end of last year. Again, referencing the next gen stats, like running back elusiveness metric that I was working with at NFL, like he was a guy who just absolutely, in that brief moment at the end of the season really shined. I mean, and you could just see it watching him. He's a tough guy to bring down. I mean, he looked like a feature back, but he's never been a feature back at any point in his Alabama days. Obviously his early run with the Dolphins, until that little glimpse, we've never really seen Kenyon Drake be that bell cow back. Now the question then becomes for us, was that a sign of things to come, or was it just kind of a random flash in the pan, a CJ Anderson type thing where we saw him really shine at the end of the year as a feature back, but he's never been that player, and really I don't think has ever become that since. That's one of the key questions in fantasy drafts to me, because Kenyon Drake is, like I said, he's definitely a player I really want to like. But is it a situation where he becomes a total committee back with Frank Gore, and again on an offense that I don't expect to be very good? Then you've probably wasted that 4th round pick or whatever you've spent on him, and you're not starting him most weeks. He's definitely, I would say, one of the most confusing players this entire draft season.
Well, it's the 4th round pick that really gets me too, because let's say he is in somewhat of a committee. Let's say he plays 60% of the snaps, Gore plays 40% of the snaps, or someone else gets into the mix too. As long as he's the one catching balls out of the backfield, I think that he could be in a 60-40 split if he had the good end, and even if you minimize his goal line touches, maybe he'll sneak his way into the end zone from like 25 yards out, that he can still generate enough volume to be I don't want to say Christian McCaffrey light because he's never going to generate that many targets week to week with that sort of consistency. But if he can get like 18 touches a week and end up with like 6 to 8 targets a week, I still think he's going to outperform that 4th round value.
Yeah, I think it's certainly possible. And that is why I have found myself being really enticed to take him there, because I do think there's somewhat of a floor, and I really think that ceiling is undeniable. And there's plenty of opportunity open in that offense right now. Obviously, Ajayi's gone. He's not coming back in terms of their starting running back, but Jarvis Landry being gone really opens up a lot of that short target volume that I don't think they really have a natural replacement in the receiver core group for. I mean, maybe Danny Amendola plus Albert Wilson equals one Jarvis Landry. In terms of salary, for whatever reason it does. I like Albert Wilson enough. He's always been a guy kind of on my radar, but there's certainly no proven guy ready to just take up all those targets that Landry left behind in the short passing game. And maybe some of those do go to the backfield. And I think Kenyon Drake is probably the best candidate for that.
Well, very similar to the Dolphins' backfield, the Colts' backfield looks like it could be Marlon Mack, and if that's the case, and he becomes one of these guys generating 20-plus touches a game, then he's going to be incredibly valuable for as long as he can stay in the backfield. And like you said, you can want to target the Packers' backfield because with Aaron Rodgers, there's points that are going to be scored. So is Mack's value potentially linked to the health of Andrew Luck? Because if Luck is back there, then you expect the Colts to score points regardless if they're good or not.
Yeah, see, my early read on this Colts backfield is tough because obviously we don't know. We cannot take anything for sure with Andrew Luck. We spent an entire offseason last year hearing that he was going to be back, and then he never came back. So I'm definitely in believe it when I see it mode with Andrew Luck. It's nice that he's throwing at least a high school football or whatever. But my early read on this Colts backfield as an extension of that has just been, hey, let's just take some of these later guys. Marlon Mack is obviously boosted up because I think we know him the most, but these guys like Nyheim Hines and Jordan Wilkins, those are the guys I find myself attracted to because just like Marlon Mack, they were not high priority draft picks this past year, but Nyheim Hines is a flashy guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield. They really liked him at South Carolina. I think the Colts really are going to like him as kind of maybe a James White, Dion Lewis type of player for them, what the Patriots have had in the past. And Jordan Wilkins is a guy that you can get as the last pick in your draft. And I don't think it's out of the realm of the possibility at all that he actually ends up being more of that early down guy than Marlon Mack is. Marlon Mack, you talked about Jamal Williams earlier being that consistent, like get you 3-4 yards and keep the chains moving. If you look at Marlon Mack last year, he was like the complete opposite. He would flash some big play runs, but then he would lose yardage. He would, just gain 1 when he should have gained 4. And I think that's going to be his biggest problem in terms of like becoming a consistent running back who gets touches every single week. I think that instability in his running style is going to be something that holds him back from that. And that's why I like taking Jordan Wilkins as kind of a hedge on that.
So you're big on Wilkins. When I had Mike Clay on, he was very big on Wilkins as well. And this proved to be a great success for me in drafts last year. And you don't always hit on it. And frankly, it only lasted a very short period of time. But in a lot of drafts, I used my last 2 or 3 picks. Didn't draft a kicker, didn't draft a defense because I'm doing my draft before the year starts. So why do I need those things? I might as well just have more people on my roster in case someone gets hurt or something like that. Or this guy eventually just, hey, week 1, he's the starter now. So I drafted Chris Carson and Tariq Cohen as my last 2 picks in a lot of drafts. Wilkins seems like one of those guys this year that he probably will not enter the year starting number 1 on the depth chart, but he could be number 1 by week 2.
Yeah, and the best case scenario too is like an Alfred Morris example from many, many years ago. He was a total unknown from, what was he, like Florida International, Florida Atlantic, one of those random Florida schools. And he comes in and there's a lot of buzz on him from the beat writers, people that are observing it, in the preseason, he's getting some run. The coaches are talking about it and people didn't really want to buy into it. But then you look at what happened, like it became, I think he led the league in rushing that year. I mean, it feels like forever ago that RG3 was a relevant starting quarterback, but that wasn't that long ago. And you know, that's what you could see happen here with Jordan Wilkins is kind of that exact same scenario. So that's why I like taking him. And again, Nyheim Hines is certainly on my radar too. But the fact that you can get Wilkins is basically your last pick. And like you said, if he becomes nothing, you cut him and move on, and it's no big deal. But if you take Mac, you know, with a single digit round pick, you're probably going to be feeling that if he ends up becoming kind of a non-factor.
The most difficult backfield to figure out every single year, the Patriots backfield. And what do they have now? More running backs, even better. And they spent a first-round pick on one in the draft. So Sony Michel is the one leading the ADP charge. He's inside the top 50 right now, which seems a bit lofty for a Patriots running back. And you know he's not going to get all of the work. They still have Jeremy Hill. They still have Mike Gillislee. I would expect both those guys to be cut, but you never know. And maybe like Brandon Bolden gets in the mix. Then you have James White, and then you have Rex Burkhead. I think you might see Rex Burkhead play some sort of hybrid backfield and slot receiver role for this team, at least while Julian Edelman is out. So he just might be on the field a lot. He's my favorite pick of the bunch, but do we have any clue how this is going to shake down? And like, could you justify taking Sony Michel inside the top 4 rounds?
Well, here's why you can always justify taking a Patriots running back, even if it's confusing, is because they matter. They consistently score inside the top 10 in terms of running back points per game, PPR points, whatever you want to look at. They consistently are up there because, again, running backs are all about finding that good offense and getting the running backs that are attached to that offense. And the Patriots, obviously, I don't need to break the news to anybody, are consistently one of the best offenses in the entire league. So that's why I'm still taking shots at this backfield. Now, I have not made it a point to target Sony Michel in those ranges. He typically is going higher than I want to look at. So I'm with you about Rex Burkhead kind of being the guy that I'm zeroing in on, especially if I've gone some of those more wide receiver heavy approaches early on in the draft. Then Rex Burkhead is a guy that I think I can trust to get me a pretty decent floor. And look, they trusted him to be, you know, kind of that passing game asset over a guy like James White, who is another player that I think we always have to consider because they clearly like him. But they pivoted to Burkhead as that passing game back, while Dion Lewis was kind of that early down banger for them, which again is ironic given his size, but he's a great interior runner. You know, I think we've already seen the ideal scenario with Burkhead and Sony Michel, how that's going to work out with what we saw from Burkhead and Lewis last year. So there's definitely a blueprint available. And in that situation, I'm usually just taking the cheaper guy, and that is definitely going to be Burkhead.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to taking James White either, especially, I mean, in standard formats, leave him be. In PPR formats, he's picked 158 right now. You know he's going to have 4 games this year with 8 catches. You just have to... It's going to be tough to figure out which weeks those are, but like even in something like a best ball format, that just having him on your roster, he's probably going to end up being inside of your top 2 running backs 3 to 4 times during the course of a season.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like in best ball leagues, absolutely. I think James White is worth looking at. You know, it depends on where you're playing. You know, draft is a half PPR, MFL 10s are full PPR, but you know, nevertheless, I still think you're going to get some weeks out of James White, and we all know that predicting them is going to be difficult, but that's the appeal of the best ball.
San Francisco, they signed Jerick McKinnon. They still have Breda. They have Joe Williams on the roster, and Kyle Juszczyk is there. He catches passes. So are we convinced Jerick's the guy, or could this just be a split situation? Because you hear about a spark score and how much of an athlete Jerick is and how great he is in the passing game. But then you watch him and you're like, I don't know if he's going to end up with 20 carries a game. I don't know if it's optimal for him to end up with 20 carries a game. It's always like the Lamar Miller situation where it's like, oh, Lamar Miller is going to be so much better now. He's going to get 25 carries a game. And he did exactly the same thing with 25 carries a game. In fact, he did worse with 25 carries a game than he used to do with 12 touches a game, and just keep him fresh throughout the course of the game. Jerick strikes me as potentially one of those guys. But on the other hand, if he does get the bell cow role and he is capable of staying healthy, it's a very valuable spot in this backfield. I'm just finding it very difficult to see how it's going to break out.
Yeah, I haven't had the stones yet to take Jerick McKinnon as high as he goes, man. I wish I did, because I see the path to how this works out. Like I'm 100% with you. You can't get around the fact that Jerick McKinnon has not been a good runner at the NFL level yet. You know, you look at his yards per carry, you look at how often he goes down on first contact, whatever. He's not been a good, you know, just traditional runner. He goes down too easy. However, he's been an incredible pass catcher, and I think Kyle Shanahan might be my favorite offensive mind in the league. And I do expect Jimmy Garoppolo to take this offense to the next level. And again, what I was just saying earlier is we always care about running backs attached to good offenses. You're going to kind of have to pay an iron price to get Jerick McKinnon, but a pass catching back in a creative offense like this that's going to be up tempo, that's going to score a lot of points. I mean, that is really appealing. And the fact that he does give you a pretty safe floor, like there are some early running backs that I think you take, and because they don't have this incredible pass catching floor, if they bust out, you're really going to be left, holding the bag. You're going to be in trouble. With Jerick McKinnon, I don't think you're going to at any point feel like, wow, I'm getting nothing out of this guy. I mean, you might not get what you paid for, but you're probably not getting nothing. But my question, I guess, for you, Pat, and for anybody out there that, like me, and doesn't really totally want to buy into McKinnon as that early down running back, is who then is the spotlight on next? And for me, I have found myself taking Matt Breida in double-digit rounds because I kind of like what I saw from him last year, and I think there's a non-0% chance that he becomes a early down complement to what Jerick McKinnon brings. Yeah,
I mean, that would be the next logical name on the list, just from an overall perspective, where Jerick McKinnon is going in drafts, and I'm with you. You say you don't have the stones to take him. I'm just going to call myself a coward, and I haven't taken him yet. I just look at the guys that are going around. Like, A.J. Green's right there. Devonta Adams is right there. Keenan Allen. Like, I would still rather have Devonta Freeman in this situation than Jerick McKinnon. Like, Mike Evans is right there. I'm curious to see what happens to Mike Evans' value because of the Jameis suspension, whether or not that's reduced, but I don't actually think it matters all that much. I wasn't super high on Mike Evans to begin with, but I don't really care if it's the Fitzmagic or if it's Jameis Winston, and Mike Evans is going to do whatever he was going to do to begin with. That doesn't really affect the situation. It's just I like those receivers a lot more, and I like Freeman a lot more, so I don't really want to gamble on the uncertain nature of the role Jerick could play, even if I am giving up a bit of upside.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've consistently found myself targeting those receivers that you mentioned there around the 2-3 turn over a player like Jerick McKinnon. An interesting name for me that if you are going running back is like Jordan Howard versus Jerick McKinnon, because that
I would take I would take Jerick 10 times out of 10 in that spot.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what I was saying about like this, if the running back busts, like if he's not going to give you what you've paid for, that's fine. But Jordan Howard's going to absolutely kill you some weeks because he has no pass catching floor, whereas Jerick McKinnon definitely gives you that. So yeah, I mean, from an overall perspective, maybe Howard ends up outscoring McKinnon, but at the same time, I think from a week-to-week perspective, you're probably going to feel a little bit safer about sliding McKinnon in.
In Denver, you have Devontae Booker back. Royce Freeman was drafted. They also drafted David Williams and Phillip Lindsay. So everyone's just ready to hand this job over to Freeman as being the 3-down back. He's going to be the guy in Denver. And if that's the case, it seems like people are still a bit hesitant because the ADP hasn't gotten out of control yet. Because if you told me that he's an 80% snap player, he's going to be involved in the passing game and get all the touches, I mean, you should realistically be going inside the top 30 or top 25. There's so few of those running backs to go around. But I don't think Booker's completely out of play here yet.
No, me neither. Booker, like McKinnon, hasn't been a good runner at the NFL level. Again, too easily goes down on first contact, whatever, but he does have some receiving game chops. I think that he could hold that roll down in this offense. Denver is a tough one because I think their range of outcomes is kind of wide as an offense. The backfield for sure, but even the passing game too, so much of it depends on what you believe Case Keenum is going to give them. So I think for now, I've been kind of staying away from these backs in early drafts. Maybe as the preseason goes on and we see Royce Freeman, start to kind of take it over, maybe then I'm in on him, especially if his price stays down. But for right now, I really don't think we have anything close to clarity on what he's going to look like. The nice part is, as you mentioned, he's so cheap that if you take him right now and it doesn't work out, then you're probably not really killing yourself.
The Lions' backfield now features Kerryon Johnson, Theo Riddick, LeGarrette Blount, Zach Zenner, and Amir Abdullah. Hopefully, the Lions do us a solid here and start cutting some of these guys and let everything play itself out. But drafting Kerryon Johnson, it seems like he's going to be the guy. At least he's the guy everyone's drafting right now. It's funny, in a lot of these situations, it always just seems the second guy's always going to be better value because they're going later in drafts. Kerryon Johnson's not going super high yet. He's like a 6th, 7th round pick. But A, do you ever really want a Detroit running back based on the way that they play their offense? And B, who has ever lost draft value on Theo Riddick?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Theo Riddick's still a really appealing player, especially in PPR, especially in best ball. If you've gone, running backs, or if you've gone wide receivers early. The reason I think this backfield's more appealing is, the Lions have signaled with their moves this offseason that they want to get better as a running team. And obviously wanting to, as Marcus Grant, my friend and former NFL colleague, always says, it's nice to want things, but, actually having them is a little bit different. But they clearly want to be a better running team. They take an offensive lineman in the first round. They take Kerryon Johnson the second round. Last year they signed two offensive linemen in free agency. They clearly want to be a better running team, which is great because they really can't be much worse. However, when you look at the running back split, I mean, the reason Amir Abdullah, beyond the fact that he hasn't been a great runner, the reason I've never been on him from a fantasy sense is because he's been stuck in this really thin margin for error role, which he doesn't get any passing game work and he doesn't get any goal line work. So he's stuck, kind of working in between the 20s and really doesn't have a safe floor and doesn't really have a high ceiling. And I think there's a pretty decent chance Kerryon Johnson ends up being in that same role. They have LeGarrette Blount. They signed him and I think they're going to use him most likely as a goal line back in the red zone because he's big and NFL teams think big must be good in red zone. Give him the carries there. They have Theo Riddick, who's a proven pass catcher. I don't think Kerryon Johnson usurps him for the receiving back role. So again, it leaves him in this really thin margin for error role. But right now, what I like about him is that his price is palatable. As you mentioned, he's not too expensive. I do think this is going to be a pretty good offense. So I have found myself interested in him where he's going in drafts right now. And as long as that price doesn't get out of control, I think he's okay. That's been the problem with Amir Abdullah kind of stuck in the same role these past few years, is that he always got too expensive.
In Chicago, Jordan Howard and the Hebrew Hammer, Tariq Cohen, is going to catch all the passes, I assume. But now that Nagy has taken over, what are the chances that Jordan Howard's just a guy that gets 15 carries a game and all the goal line work, and we see a lot of Cohen on the field?
I think there's a chance at that. Jordan Howard, at least from like a ability or stylistic perspective, seems like kind of an odd fit in what we would assume is going to be an up-tempo progressive spread offense. However, he's been one of the best, pure runners since he got into the NFL. Over the last 2 years, he's been a really strong early down back. I mean, he's a total dud in the passing game, just a net negative, which is really troublesome from a fantasy perspective because as I mentioned, it's just tough to trust the floor there. But he is discounted right now as a guy who's probably going to score a lot of touchdowns, probably going to lead the team by a decent margin in carries. The fact that he's cheaper than, you would normally expect from a guy who's been a really good overall fantasy finisher in his first 2 years, I have found myself, if he gets to kind of that third round range, being interested in him depending on who I've taken earlier. If I've gone with a Todd Gurley, first overall or whatever, which I have in several best ball drafts, or Le'Veon Bell or whatever. And then Howard is there at that 2-3 turn. He's appealing to me because I know he's going to give me some big weeks. And the fact that I have what we all hope is a locked in stud running back with that first pick, I think you can kind of guarantee yourself a little bit of safety there, a little bit of insulation from the down weeks from Howard. So he's not a player that I normally go into drafts expecting to target, but if he's there and I've built the right roster that I think can handle his volatility, he's someone that I have been taking here and there.
Obviously, he's a better pick in standard formats and PPR leagues because then you're not so concerned about the floor of even a lot of the players that we've been talking about so far, whether it's Theo Riddick, whether it's Bilal Powell, Tariq Cohen, even another one on his own team, that you take PPR out of the equation, those guys ain't so good anymore. They're basically undraftable. But when you look at who he's going around running back-wise, he's on this next little tier down from the Jerick McKinnon, Devonta Freeman, LaShawn McCoy, Christian McCaffrey tier in PPR formats. He's essentially a coin flip with Joe Mixon right now. And I don't know if I like either one of those guys so much. And then you go to this next tier, like 10 picks later, you have like Alex Collins right there. I think I would pick Alex Collins over Jordan Howard this season.
Yeah, I mean that's bold, but there's there's a chance you're not wrong about that at all. I mean, Collins is a guy that I really like this year that I have been taking in drafts. Was legitimately awesome last year. You know, you can ask yourself whether that's a flash in the pan or not, but he was a guy that gave the Ravens an identity on offense when they did not have anything of the sort. You know, he was a guy who flashed consistently, and then finally when they turned to him as their bell cow back, he was really good. And then, you know, they started to give him a little bit of work in the passing game too. And he was, you know, again, like a solid C plus B minus in that. So I think he's definitely a player that I'm looking at. And, you know, yeah, totally in the realm of possibilities that he's a better fantasy pick than Jordan Howard this year.
Well, I think it's just being able to backdoor his way into catches simply by being on the field could really go a long way. Whether they want to use Buck Allen as a receiving back, if Kenneth Dixon's going to return and, you know, flash some ability in the passing game, that could really disrupt this entire process. But I think if you just look at them on paper right now and be like, well, Alex Collins probably plays a higher percentage of the snaps than Jordan Howard, unless they do some sort of Cohen-Howard backfield where they're both on the field at the same time, like we saw a lot with Duke Johnson last year and Isaiah Crowell in Cleveland. Or it's just Alex Collins back there. He gets his 15 to 20 carries a game and backdoors his way into 5 targets. And if that's the case, he is going to be better.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Again, he's someone that I'm definitely targeting in those mid-round range, especially if I've gone wide receivers earlier. Then I think he's a guy who could be, you know, a pretty safe high-end RB2.
All right, well, maybe a better comparison to Jordan Howard is Derrick Henry, who's going pretty close to him because you have Dion Lewis back there now, and that is going to be a split. Just like Chicago may not be a split in terms of carries, but in terms of snaps, it could end up being pretty close, especially if they're bad. You would expect Cohen to be on the field a little bit more. So in Tennessee, what do we do? Like, is Jordan Howard and Derrick Henry, are they closer than they seem? Is one significantly better? And Derrick Henry's not a bad pass catcher. We just know Lewis is a really good pass catcher. But that doesn't mean he's not going to get catches, does it?
No, I think this one is not easy to figure out the split, you know, because Dion Lewis, he's kind of billed as this passing game asset, but he's been, as I mentioned, a great interior runner, was one of the best interior runners last year. He consistently made the first defender miss, one of the most elusive backs in the NFL during the second half of the season. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he gets a lot more early down work than people are thinking. And with Derrick Henry, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that he kind of digs into that passing game work too. This is a real tough backfield to parse out, but I have definitely been taking my shots on both of these guys, especially now that Henry's price has come down. I still prefer Lewis if he's there in that late 5th, early 6th round range. I mean, he's an immediate pick for me because I do think he's going to be the heavy favorite for passing game work, and that's going to give him a nice safe floor, while I also think he represents a ceiling player too on a week-to-week basis. He's been my preferred guy. But in best ball, if I need some running backs around that in the late 5th, 5th round or late 4th, 5th round range, and especially in best ball where I don't have to pick when Derrick Henry is going to score a couple of touchdowns a week, then I like taking Derrick Henry in that scenario. Again, because I think this offense is going to take a nice step forward with Matt LaFleur, you know, Kyle Shanahan disciple, spent last year with Sean McVay being that guy up in the booth that read the coverages, you know, for Jared Goff before he would get the calls from Sean McVay and everything. I think this is going to be an offense that takes a nice step forward. I like a lot of the players in the passing game too. So I want to take my shots on this backfield, even though I don't have a ton of confidence in how the split's going to work out. I know that I want some pieces of it.
Well, when we get into these situations where we're really unclear, like, is Corey Davis really going to be the breakout guy, or is it going to be Rashard Matthews, or is Delaney Walker just going to lead the team in receptions again? Then you look at the backfield. Well, is it going to be Henry? Is it going to be Lewis? Isn't the one constant the guy that you want to take? And he's the one who's going the latest. Just take Mariota, and that's your piece of this offense.
Yeah, I love to look at these situations as like just from an entire team perspective, and where prices and drafts don't really make sense. You're right. Like, it's similar to the Giants right now, how all of their skill position players are going super high, but their quarterback is almost essentially ignored. That doesn't make sense. Like, one is not going to happen if the other happens. You know what I mean? So with the Titans, it's the same way. If we expect all of those things to work out in the passing game, that should mean we ought to be drafting Marcus Mariota a lot higher than we are. And that's why when you get to those double-digit rounds, he's one of my favorite late-round quarterback candidates. Not only that, but, you know, all the work that J.J. Zacharyason's done with looking at touchdown rate as a thing to be a predictor of regression or progression on a year-to-year basis. I really like the way that stacks up for Mariota as well.
Well, it's funny because Mariota went from having like the all-time best touchdown rate, better than Aaron Rodgers, to completely regressing to having one of the worst. So if he can find himself somewhere in the middle, plus you add in a few rushing yards, maybe a few rushing touchdowns, the upside is clearly there if this offense does take a step forward this season. Cleveland backfield. Carlos Hyde they signed, they draft Nick Chubb, and the Duke still lingers about on the shores of Lake Erie. Is it Lake Erie in Cleveland?
Yes,
Boom!
That is correct.
Knowing lakes. I'm on Lake Ontario because I'm in Ontario. The rest of them, I really have no idea. This offense is really confusing because there are parts of it, almost like that Tennessee offense and the Giants offense, that some people love parts of it. Like, oh, Tyrod's going to rebound. Josh Gordon's going to be great. Jarvis Landry's going to be great. Corey Coleman could be a sleeper. You want a deep sleeper? David Njoku, he's great. What the hell goes on in this backfield? And not everyone on Cleveland's going to be good.
Yeah, maybe you have no ideas about the lake. I have no idea about the backfield here in Cleveland, man. Like, this is one I don't think I've taken any of Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson, or Nick Chubb through any of the early best ball drafts I've done. I think there are so many different ways this can go. And again, it's an offense that I don't trust to necessarily take. I think it's going to be better this year. No doubt about it. I'm in on the Browns, like being a much better offense. I mean, they have too much. I feel like we've said this before, but they have too much talent to fail once again as an offense. But I don't know that I trust them to take such a massive step forward that all of a sudden I'm going to want to take shots at this backfield. Some of these guys' prices are palatable, but the fact that things are just so split up, there's just no clarity at all. I have pretty much found myself avoiding these guys. I think the smartest play, at least in my head in a hypothetical situation, is that this does start out as a gross split early on in the year where, they paid Carlos Hyde. I don't think he's going to be around for the long term, but I do think they'll at least try to get some weeks out of him. Duke Johnson's going to do his pass catching thing, but with Jarvis Landry there, some of those short targets are just going to go right to that slot receiver. And then that brings me to Nick Chubb, who, again, I do not want to draft Nick Chubb at this point, but maybe early on in the season, if it is that split, maybe that's when you start to explore some buy low trades with Nick Chubb, who I do think is a really good pure runner, kind of in that Jordan Howard sense. Maybe he can be a better, well, it's hard to be a worse pass catching back than Jordan Howard, but I think you can get a little bit more out of him there. And the Browns clearly like him. They didn't have a great need at the running back position, but they took him with the second round pick. I think it was the Brock Osweiler pick that they said, hey, we'll take your wounded soldier here, Houston, and just, send us over a second round pick. We'll eat that salary, which is a great trade. And then they end up kind of taking a running back that they don't need, which is confusing. But it does show that they like Nick Chubb, the player. And I think it's smart for fantasy owners to take that into account, but probably not do it in drafts. Probably look to do it in season, especially because he's a guy that might even get, cut during the early waiver wire run for fantasy if he's not getting a ton of touches.
His situation could be a lot like Jordan Howard's was when he was a rookie, where everyone kind of identified that Jordan Howard was the superior talent to Jeremy Langford, but you knew that Langford was going to start the year, and how long was that going to last? Would they ever make the move? And by like week 8, Jordan Howard was really good, but you could have had him for essentially free or picked him up, like you mentioned, the early parts of the season. Do you think that's a move to make in some leagues where you just target some of these backups, maybe get 2 of them on your roster, knowing you're not going to play them, and hopefully one of them becomes a starter after like week 3? These high pedigree guys that maybe went 8th, 9th, 10th round that haven't done anything yet. Like, you could have done this with Alvin Kamara last year.
Mm-hmm. No, that's actually a really good situation to bring up, because it kind of gets to the heart of a lot of what I think we've been dancing around here with these running back backfields. It's that what we think of these players doesn't really matter. Like, we could all tell that Jordan Howard was better than Jeremy Langford.
I got that one wrong, by the way. Clay
oh, really?
Clay scolded me for it. I just said he was gonna play. He was like, if he's gonna play, I'm gonna take him.
But you were right. He did play
poorly.
Played himself off the field. But that's the thing. Like, sometimes it takes these coaching staffs a little while to get hip to that too. It took a little while for them to get Jeremy Langford off the field. It actually took injuries to get him off the field. So that's what I think could be the situation that happens in Cleveland. Carlos Hyde, I think Carlos Hyde is a good running back. I think he's at least solid overall. So I think he's someone that, could probably keep himself on the field for a while, or could play himself off the field because Nick Chubb is just that good. So to me, I think that I'm with you. Like, the smart move is just to stash some of these guys, the Jordan Wilkins, the Nick Chubbs, these guys who are going to be cheaper. I never like to handcuff running backs, but I do like to stash backups as the year goes on, because that's when I'm looking to get some of these backup running backs on the field when they start to get their roles clear. And Alex Collins is a really good example of how that worked out last year.
I don't mind taking handcuffs, but I don't need to necessarily handcuff myself. I always find it's not necessarily a minus EV position to take, because at the end of the year, it does make a lot of sense that if you take Chris Ivory and he's backing up LaShawn McCoy, if LaShawn McCoy decides to call it quits week 13, having Chris Ivory is a great situation to be in. But if you know that if your starter goes down, just having a backup who could potentially walk into a split situation, like, there's no point of doing that. Like, I would rather just have Chris Ivory on my team, even if I didn't have LaShawn McCoy, in case something happened to LaShawn McCoy, because it works in a situation where, yeah, you lose your starting running back, then you get someone slightly worse to replace him. If it's on my team, I have my 2 starters, and all of a sudden I could have another starter on my team. You just build overall value on your roster. It's a bit riskier, obviously, and you do have to waste those bench spots, or at least allocate those bench spots for value in a different perceived way than I think a lot of people treat those. Like, why do I need a 7th receiver? I don't. Why do I need a backup quarterback? I don't. I don't need a... Yeah. I can drop my defense on a bye week. Like, that's not the end of the world. I can pick up someone week to week to play. So I think that using that back end as basically essentially stash spots on some of these guys is the right way to go about it. So we get to Oakland, and one of my other favorite things to do, which is it's like a 50-50 rate, but just taking these guys that are going to play and get the touches. It's the Jeremy Langford effect. Like, week 1, is this guy going to get 20 touches in this backfield? If the answer is yes, I'm interested in that guy. Marshawn Lynch is that guy. Doug Martin's not running him out of town. They clearly don't really care about DeAndre Washington or Jalen Richard. And one of the big things is, hey, if the guy's going to play, you always go with the volume over the talent, and understanding how the coaches work is huge too. John Gruden's going to play beast mode. Guaranteed.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Marshawn Lynch is a guy that, like, I didn't enter this fantasy season thinking I'd be targeting. I almost never enter a draft thinking I'm going to be targeting him, but he's consistently available in the 7th round, and getting a starting running back in the 7th round, and I'm with you, he will be the starting running back of the Raiders. Get out of here with this Doug Martin thing. He's going to be that guy, and getting him in the 7th round is just such a big advantage, as, like, especially if it's like your 4th running back or something. You can get him on his big weeks. You don't have to trust him through some down ones. I think he's been one of my favorite fantasy picks this year, especially in a best ball league or whatever. It doesn't even matter if I've gone early running back, early receiver. He's a guy I consistently end up drafting. It's not even just like a opportunity thing. I think he was good to end the year. The Raiders kept on trying to save him for like a mythical playoff run that never happened and was never going to happen because they weren't a good team. But when they gave him chances to be more of a high carry back as the year went on, he was good. He was efficient. He was consistently making defenders miss and getting yards after contact. So I've been drafting him on almost every team and really enjoying it.
He's a great 3rd running back to have too, or potential flex player, because he can fill in for you in those bye weeks, and he might be a nice buy low candidate at the beginning of the year, because the first 2 weeks they get the Rams and they get the Broncos. Those are 2 less than ideal matchups. Then he goes Dolphins, Browns, Chargers, not so great. Seahawks, good matchup. Colts, good matchup. 49ers, good matchup. Then you're back to the Chargers. So you have that like in-between stretch where if he has a bad first week, decent buy low to play weeks 3 through 7 and see what happens then. And if you can buy someone low and then flip them high 3 weeks later, that's probably the move that you want to do. You package them together with one of your receivers and boom, you go and get a stud running back on a team that's flailing or started like 2-4, something like that. So I do like Marshawn Lynch in that sense. He's absolutely unsexy this season, but he's someone that's going to get volume. Do you think John Gruden's going to be throwing fades to the back of the end zone, or if they get on the 1 yard line, they're going to run with Marshawn Lynch 3 times in a row?
Oh man, we're going back to 1998, baby. Like we're pounding that thing in at the goal line. So yeah, I love everything about Lynch. Whether you take it from a strategy perspective and you want to flip him if you don't really believe in him, is the fact that he's so cheap. It just gives you so much flexibility.
Last backfield. After the Redskins drafted Darius Geis, it was like, it's Geis's backfield. But Rob Kelly's still there. Chris Thompson is returning, and is one of the better receiving backs in all of football. Samaje Perine got work last year, and can never forget Capri Bibbs, because he will start a game this season. He always starts a game every single season for some random team. So if he gets cut, watch out where he goes, because those other running backs, they're getting hurt at some point, because the Bibbs got to be in the game. But is this Geis's backfield? Because he's being drafted like it is, and I'm not certain he's going to play 70% of the snaps.
Yeah, Capri Bibbs, the Ryan Fitzpatrick of the running back position. No matter what, it's an NFL bylaw. He's getting on the field. I'm with you. I have not found myself really attracted to Darius Geis where he goes in drafts, because I think he could be kind of like that Jordan Howard type of role. I mean, they have a legit stud in the backfield. In Chris Thompson in the receiving game, a guy who is not just an asset, but a weapon in the passing game. I mean, we know his health is unreliable. I mean, that's why it's taken so long for him to break out, because he's been injured in the NFL, and he was injured at Florida State after really looking like a special player there. So he is by no means a guarantee. And if he gets hurt, then there's a chance Geis just assumes all that passing game work, because I think he's fine as a receiver, and he's probably better than Rob Kelly and Samaje Perine are. So I do think there's a chance that Geis works out, but a lot of things have to go right. The reason that I'm interested in Thompson, at least, and I want to be interested in Geis more than I am, is I think this offense is going to be really good. If you look at what the skill position players in Washington, and no doubt there's a lot of volatility with guys like Jordan Reed, Paul Richardson, and Josh Doxson have had injury troubles in the NFL level, Jamison Crowder too, but all those guys are good skill position players, and I think Alex Smith can come in and run this offense like Jay Gruden wants it to be run. He's one of those coaches that wants the quarterback to just be an extension of him on the field. And I think Smith can do that. So this whole Washington offense, I do think, is underrated. And based on what I've said about running backs throughout the show, I do want to attach my running backs to good offenses. I just haven't found myself able to invest in Geis because of what you mentioned. I don't know that he's going to be a high snap player. I think Thompson is the guy that I'm much more comfortable taking a few rounds later.
You know that Chris Thompson's going ahead of Marshawn Lynch?
Yeah, which is nuts. I mean, I still think I'd rather have Lynch.
I would rather have Lynch too, and I agree with you. Like, it's going to be fun to own Chris Thompson. I think that he's going to be good, but like, it just how devalued Marshawn Lynch has become in terms of Geis. Like, he's going a pick ahead of Alex Collins right now, and I know essentially what Alex Collins' role is going to be, and I think that fewer things need to break his way for him to really hit his ceiling. The ceiling on Geis might be higher, but I think that in the range of outcomes, Alex Collins reaching his ceiling is probably far likelier to occur.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Would rather have Collins over Geis. I just think the hype for Geis is, I'm from the DC area. I used to live there. Obviously live in LA now, but like, one of my friends, he texts me all the time. He's like, man, every social media post that the Redskins Twitter account puts out is like consistently Geis. So they're pretty hyped on him too, and I think that's going to bleed into fantasy prices.
All right, let's ditch fantasy for a second. The NFL finally released its top 10 in terms of the best players of the year, voted on by the players. So here is the top 10. Brady, Antonio Brown, Carson Wentz at number 3, Julio Jones, Le'Veon Bell, Gurley, Aaron Donald, Drew Brees, Von Miller, Aaron Rodgers. So I guess they only asked like offensive players who the best players in the league were. You have 2 defensive players inside the top 10, seems kind of crazy. And I know he was hurt for a large stretch of last year, but isn't Aaron Rodgers just number 1 always?
Yeah. I think he should be. I mean, I get why Brady's up there, obviously, but Rodgers, I mean, the fact he was hurt last year and that offense just completely evaporated, I think really just shows what kind of value he brings as a player. Look, you're right. Who do they ask about these? They definitely ask players, but I don't know. I worked there for 3 years, and I still have no clear idea how the methodology works.
Well, I mean, it's a great exercise because it really does trigger a lot of people. Like, how do you not have my favorite player at number 1? That's ludicrous, and I'm going to be upset about it on the internet.
My favorite thing that happens on Twitter is that every year people are like, "Oh, we don't need to pay attention to the top 100 list. We don't need to." And then every time it comes out, people are quote tweeting the NFL Network handle with the graphics or whatever, and people are pissed. People are pissed, and they're talking about it, and it creates discussion. And look, here in June, that's what people are looking to do. There's not a lot to report on. There's not a lot to discuss. So creating a little controversy and having people talk about it, that works for a network.
I know it can't work this way, but if we were really to rank the best players in the NFL, or at least the most valuable players, or whatever metric or terminology that you want to use to define this list, like how many of the top 10 would actually be quarterbacks? 8? 10?
Yeah, I mean, most valuable, yeah, right. Like, because if your quarterback goes down, you're probably screwed. So, yeah, it would be a clear slant there. I'm surprised at how. But again, I guess you see quarterbacks, and for players, if they ask guys, they probably think it's more of a team mentality thing than it's all about the quarterback. I think fans and especially media is more quarterback focused than probably the entire player is. But I think it's the right take. I think everything does revolve around the quarterback position.
I thought it was really interesting that Julio was 4th on this list because the fantasy world is anti-Julio, yet the players seem to think he's incredible.
Yeah, and I'm with the players on this one. Like, I know he doesn't score a ton of touchdowns and everything, but I think you watch him play and just how valuable he is, I think is very, very apparent. Yeah, that is the good thing that like players will do more than just react to, I think like one specific stat line, which is what people do with Julio Jones and touchdowns, no doubt about it. But I was with you. I was a little surprised to see I was pleasantly surprised, let's put it that way, that he got so much credit, which again, I think is credit he deserves.
So Aaron Donald is the highest defensive player on this list. One defensive player of the year. That makes a lot of sense. He is the best defensive player, at least the most impactful defensive player in football, at least in my mind. And if you agree, who would actually be second? Because I don't think it's Von Miller anymore.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, there's a lot of defensive players that have kind of fallen off the map. Whether you're looking at, some of the Seattle guys that are gone. J.J. Watt obviously has been in and out of the lineup. I think it might be Miller, but also like just based on last year, like what Calais Campbell I think did for Jacksonville, like it's tough to parse out like who you want to give credit to in that Jacksonville defense, which is what happens when you have a ton of great players.
Well,
but I think
it could work one of two ways with that too. Like, is Jalen Ramsey really, really good because Campbell was able to apply so much pressure the quarterbacks had to get the ball out quickly, make bad throws, and then he's just locked down on the outside? Or is Calais Campbell getting more opportunity to get to the quarterback because the quarterback has no one to throw to because his best receiver is constantly covered?
Yeah, see, and I think it's like both things can be true. Like Jalen Ramsey can be a stud shutdown corner, and he's someone that I would have like in this discussion as who's the second best defensive player, because not only is he a great lockdown corner, he's somebody that is an enforcer. He likes to get physical with players, and I think that mentality is something that gives Jacksonville's defense an edge. But like, I think both things can be true. Like, he can be a shutdown all-pro corner, and Calais Campbell can be one of the best and most versatile edge defenders in the NFL. So he's someone that I definitely think is someone that needs a lot of credit. And don't sleep on Chandler Jones too. Like, he's the guy who is under discussed because the Cardinals didn't have a great defense last year. Guys like, Everson Griffin and Yannick Ngakoue from Jacksonville and Von Miller and Khalil Mack got a lot more credit. But Chandler Jones was a really great player last year too. And I don't know that he's up there as the second best in the league, but he's somebody that definitely deserves some pub.
Yeah, so it was Von Miller, then Luke Kuechly, Calais Campbell, Khalil Mack, Jalen Ramsey, and Everson Griffin were the defensive players inside the top 20 overall. I guess that does end up making sense, but like, I didn't look at the entire list. How high do you think the highest O-lineman was?
Oh my God, I don't even know. Like, yeah, I don't pay attention much to the list, but like, it does feel like now with Joe Thomas gone, we're kind of in like a offensive lineman, like in terms of those elite guys. Like, when I was younger, it was, the Walter Jones, like the Orlando Pace, Jonathan Ogden. We don't have any of those like transcendent offensive linemen. So I have no idea how the highest guy would be.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Thomas got Rookie of the Year votes in his rookie year. I don't think we're going to be seeing that from any offensive lineman in the near future. All right, before I let you go, I got an idea for you. Let me run this by you. So you go from being the fantasy hipster at the NFL Network. When you get to Yahoo, you need to go and you talk to Brad about this, because I know he's in on a lot of this wrestling stuff too. You go full heel. You're now corporate Matt Harmon. You're wearing, it's basically the same thing that The Rock did. The Rock, he was the baby face, and as soon as he went bad, everyone started to like The Rock way more than they used to, and he became the gigantic star. So I think suits, ties, you ditch the glasses, you put in contacts, or at least debate yourself on some sort of split screen with a hipster and corporate attitude where you take one side of one thing, one side of another. I think this is the move here.
It's something to consider for sure. Like there's just a lot of ability to play with that personality for sure. Tucked in shirt every day, completely different, just really overly dressed up for an environment like Yahoo has. I think there's a lot of potential for that. And you mentioned like just total corporate, like it's funny that I'm leaving the NFL to somehow go to Yahoo, and it's owned by Verizon and all that, like a bigger corporate conglomerate. Like my 16-year-old self is probably disgusted, but my 26-year-old self maybe a little bit more of a grown up.
No, listen, I thinking about back to me. If it was my 16-year-old self, I'm thinking, man, get them checks. You're doing all right here. All right, Matt Harmon, where can everyone follow you on Twitter? And I don't know if you have a date when you're going to start releasing content for Yahoo, but if you do, you can give us a quick tease with that.
Sure. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at @MattHarmon_BYB. If you're looking for my content right now, it's all in the Fantasy Footballers Ultimate Draft Kit, which you can find a link to buy at receptionperception.com. All my wide receiver work is there. And with Yahoo, I'll be starting the 9th of July. So it's coming up here in just the next couple weeks, and you'll be seeing plenty of fun content from there.
All right. Well, you can just go enjoy America Day, then enjoy Matt's content. It seems like a pretty good 1-2 combo.
Perfect.
All right, I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at @ThePME. Remember to check out the 2018 Pat Mayo Experience Fantasy Football Draft Kit, which is going to be like 40 shows deep. This is the best guests from around the business. Working on some big ones right now. Remember to give the episode a like and rate, review, and subscribe. iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Podomatic, Spotify, wherever you can download podcasts. Get this. You can download the Pat Mayo Experience. Who would have thought? Anyway, I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!